Hey, this is Nancy Ralsema with Quilting with Nancy and On Point TV. Thank you very much for joining me today on my channel. We are continuing our series, the Four Crossings book design that I came up with. And in the background here, you see the pieced version of that quilt. We have now currently done the center block, we've done the crossing blocks, and then we've also done the applique, the blanket stitch applique, which looked like this. So I've done the blanket stitch applique, did a whole video on that. If you have any questions about any of that, just refer back, or you can always write me at quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. Today, we're going to work on one of the techniques in the book for making the square in a square block here. Now, there are two techniques, and a lot of people don't like the first one, and then some don't like the second one. And the idea here is the first one I'm going to show you is what I'm going to call precise piecing. Now, what I like about it is it goes a little bit faster than the foundation piecing technique. I also like that it doesn't use quite as much fabric. So with foundation piecing, if you're familiar with that, that means that you actually have to cut your pieces a little bit larger to make them fit in. So I really like the precise piecing technique, but there's a lot of precision needed to make the precise piecing technique work. And that's what we'll kind of cover today. If you're interested in the foundation piecing technique, we'll just go to the next part of this video. That's where I'll be teaching you the foundation piecing. A lot of people might call that paper piecing, but technically it's actually called foundation piecing. So taking you through where we are so far, this is the quilt that I've been designing and working on, and it's got a lot of blues and yellows, and I'm calling it the Taris quilt because there is a TARDIS fabric, which is a Doctor Who, that's his time machine. The TARDIS is time and relative dimension in space, for those of you that aren't nerdy enough to quite know that. We have done the centerpiece block, and we've done the crossing blocks with the setting triangles, and now we're to the outside. Here is just kind of a version of what I'm going to be doing, and this is in the book, so you actually can color your design, so you can kind of keep track of what you're doing. And this was my little coloring design. So this is the book. This is the Four Crossings book, available on the website www.quiltingwithnancy.com. There is the printed version and there is the e-version. The advantage to the e-version, just so you know, it is always less expensive because you do have to print it yourself. But in this case, whenever there is an edit, if we find, oh my goodness, somebody told me that I put fabric F instead of fabric G or something like that, because unless you've actually ever written a book or edited a book, you know that it's just about impossible to get it all right at any given time. So I am always in constant edit mode. In this book, the printed ones, there are already some hand edits in it. On the e-version, everything is correct up to now. And as we have other, viewers try the pattern out, there might be some going, oh, how about you do this? And so we'll make that change on the e-version. Also on the e-version, you're going to be able to print out all the book, obviously, but you are in this particular process, like the foundation squares and the applique, you can print them right from that. So looking at our book here, we are to the precise piecing. So I've done all of my cuts. Oh, here's my original. There's my center block. Here is my crossing blocks, a couple of them. And there's the TARDIS, the blue box, Doctor Who's blue box. So there is a couple of things that I want you to try to get precise piecing, because when you're looking at a quilt block like this, when you're looking at this, look at the outside edge. I've actually drawn in the 1/4 inch seam allowance around the block, and you'll see that it goes right to the point of the yellow on the north, south, east, and west ends of that. Getting that to happen is going to require just a few little steps. The first thing I would recommend is spray sizing all of your fabric. Now, this happens to be my new favorite version of a spray sizing. I love its stiffness. I love its the nozzle. I am a saturator of fabric. So when I say that I want the fabric stiffened, I'm serious about that. So I'm talking stiffened almost to the consistency of a piece of paper. You're also going to want to use your guidelines for seam your guidelines for quilting seam guides, and I'll show you those when I get to my machine. And then with that being said, I want to show you a way to check and adjust your scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right. So, nope, not that shot. This shot here. This is where the test comes in. And so the idea here is take 3 strips of fabric, all cut as close to accurate as you can possibly get to 1.5 inches. And I like to use a dark, 2 darks and a light. Then you're going to sew that with your scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if you can see here really carefully, I did it a couple of times. I found that my seam allowance was just a little bit narrow for this. And then the idea, after you have done this and you've tested it out, then you're going to measure it. And the idea is you need it to measure as close to exactly in the middle at 1 inch. If you do that, the blocks have a better chance of coming out very, very precise. You also want to be sure that you're using a 50 weight thread. So it took me a couple of times to get this. So if you are thinking about trying this technique, I recommend that you really try this out. Try this testing technique out. Be sure that you've precisely cut items first, and then double check your scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. You may be surprised like I was. I think my seam allowance has been a little bit too small as of late. So I've had to do this test it a couple of times, and now it is much, much closer to what I actually need it to be. So after you've done that, then you're going to take all of your pieces and cut them up. And when you're doing the cutting, just let me show you a little bit on this piece of black fabric here. All right. So I am a lover of OmniGrid rulers. I've always loved the OmniGrid rulers. And I don't know if you can really tell, but the thing that I really like is that there's dashes between the inch lines, and the 1/4 inch lines are dashed. There's gaps in there too, so you can see with the dots. So if I want to put this at 3 1/4 inches, and I want it to be the most accurate cut I can make, I am going to be sure that the edge of the black fabric is between those dots. So the dots are literally crossing the cut edge on the top and the bottom. I also love that with the 1 of the ruler up here in my right-hand corner, because I'm right-handed and it'd be in your left if you're a left-hander, that it comes down and I can see that I am truly square, so that when I make my cut, and I'm making my cut with my blade just as close to my ruler as possible, that is going to be my most accurate cutting. Then when you do the diagonal, be sure that you are lining it up from point to point, and you can even use the 45-degree angle on a square ruler like this, lining that up so you know that this is square, and then your triangles are going to be as precise as possible. Now you're going to take each one of these triangles and fold them in half, and then take a little teeny nip out of the fold. That will give you your center marking on your triangle. So right there is my center marking, so that when I am lining that up with my fabric, my center square fabric, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to take that and fold that, nip, take it the other way. Oh, I already did that one. And then just to be preemptive, I'm going to actually do it all the way around my little square to start with, and I'm going to take the time to do it on all of my triangles. All right. So I have my little nips taken out of the centers of my squares, and then these are the triangle pieces, and I've already taken my little nip out of that, and I'm going to match up the nips, match up those little V sections that are made, pin it if you need to. For this block, you're actually able to line up the north and south sides of this square and a square. So I'm going to line that valley up so I can go to my sewing machine from here, and I'm going to show you what I mean by being able to chain piece these at the machine. So my machine is set up here with my guidelines for quilting. I have my normal A foot on my machine. This is my FAF icon. And I have moved the needle over to a 2.5 position from the edge of my guideline, which is at the edge of my foot, to where my needle is a 2.5. And as I mentioned, that's a little bigger than I thought it needed to be. Now I'm going to take my triangle pieces, being sure that I've got my leader in. I've got my leader in, especially if you're going to be piecing with triangle sections here. If you don't, the machine has a better chance of taking that triangle down. So if you use a leader, that is going to be less likely to happen. So this is what I mean by the chain piecing. So I've done my first one. This is going to be the second set after I've taken those two triangles and pressed them out. I'll take my next one, and here you see I've got my little notch already done. Oops, I think I want wrong side. Right side to right side. Centered up my center notch. Now I'm going to piece and chain piece that in. This is just more efficient. For me, I just really enjoy making it that much more efficient. So now I'm going to go to my next one. I've done all the triangles all the way around, and I have trimmed this down to the size that it says in the book. And I'll take you up to the table when we're done with the piecing and show you what I mean. But it's so important that from the corner to the edge, you still have your scant 1/4 inch. Now, there can be adjustments made because none of us are perfect, nor will we ever be. So let me show you what I mean by this. So this one here, he's a little bit narrow. From that point to the edge, I could not get my full scant 1/4 inch in there. So here I'm going to match up my little yellow notch to the middle of the block, and then I'm going to flip it over. And when I am sewing this, I am going to be aiming for that intersection. See the crisscross intersection here? I'm going to be aiming for that. Now that might mean that I have to come from my 1/4 inch and come in a little bit and then go back out. But that's what is going to be required sometimes to get, so that you don't lose your point. So right there, I had to come in so that I wasn't going over that X mark, and I think it will be okay. Now, after I've done my 2 yellow pieces on the 2 sides and press them out, now I'm going to add the 2 on the other side. Again, matching up my notch to the center of that design, and I'm going to flip it over so I can see where that X is. I want to do my very best to maybe be just to the right of it. This time it's going to work. I'm going to be just to the right of it, and that's going to even be a better precision where I'm sure that I'm not going to lose any of my points. Here, I've already done the 2 blue ones. Now I'm going to add my final piece, matching the notch, and this one you can't tell because it's a dark blue, to the center, flipping it over, and sewing from here. I always find it better to flip over, and here my X is a little bit close, so as I'm coming to it, I'm going to slightly veer so my seam allowance isn't quite as big. See how I'm not actually butt up right next to my seam guide? After I get through that X, then I'm going to go back. Now you might think, hey Nancy, I don't think that's going to work. That might mess up your block. Trust me, it's going to be just fine. Now I'm going to sew off onto my ender. And I'm going to take these to the ironing board and then meet you back at the front table. So now I'm back to my table, and I want you to see the results of what I have done. So here's all the pieces. Now I only did one side of them, but I'm pretty sure you get the idea. He's looking pretty sharp there. And let's get down to the last one. Oh, and this is the one that I told you that I had to, right here, this seam, I had to kind of scooch over a little bit. And when I pressed it, I'm still able to see the blue point. If I had followed the seam allowance as, just without thinking about it, I would have lost a little bit of that point. Now, is that going to make or break your quilt? No, it is not. If that's what you end up doing and your blocks all end up square, I would call it good and move on to the next steps. But some people want to know how to do more precision. Now, this block should measure 5 3/4 inches. And I'm doing pretty good with this one, so I'm going to be a little bit scamped. So 5 3/4 is going to be here, just shy of the 6 inch. And the idea is I want that yellow point to be as close to 1/4 inch from the edge as possible. So here, I've done pretty good here. Up at the top, That's pretty good. So I'm going to go a little bit shy there, a little bit shy there. And then here, I'm going to be really close to spot on. So now to square it up. After you analyze the block and you're sure that you're not cutting off any of the points there, you can do the two sides, spin it around. And now I can measure it. I think I need to cut that off a little bit. There. Now I can put it right into the 5 3/4 inch size that I need. Again, looking at the block, going, how close am I? Are my yellows too close to the edge? Are they going to work out quite right? Oops, need to scooch that up a little bit. That's a little bit small for this. There. So there is as close to a precisely pieced 5 3/4 inch block as I can possibly manage. Keeping in mind, like I said, there is no perfect. So you're just shooting for as good as you can get. I like this technique, as I mentioned, because it is quicker. There's not the having to sew the seam, trim the seam, all of the steps needed in foundation piecing. But if you like foundation piecing because you love the precision, which is why so many people love foundation piecing, just hold on until the next video. In the next video, I'll be taking you through step by step how to do foundation piecing on this square and a square block. The book is available on my website, www.quiltingwithnancy.com. It's available as a print version or an e-version. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. Please give me a thumbs up if you like the video, and lots of comments are always greatly appreciated. Have a great day.